Good afternoon. I am Midshipman Second Class Grace Stalker, and I have the honor of introducing this panel's moderator, Rear Admiral Selby, and its topic, Shaping the Future Fight, Integrating Innovation to Transform the Battlespace. Rear Admiral Lawrence Selby, U.S. Navy retired, commissioned through NROTC at the University of Virginia in 1986 and began his naval service as a submarine warfare officer. Early in his career, Rear Admiral Selby commanded the USS Greenville from July 2004 to May 2007 and served on several other submarines, deploying to the Western Pacific, Northern Atlantic, and Arctic Oceans. He also served as the Navy's 26th Chief of Naval Research from May 2020 until retirement. After serving 37 years in the U.S. Navy, Rear Admiral Selby joined Mayor LeBaron in 2024 and is a general partner and member of the investment team. This panel will explore the evolving battlespace as we examine the integration of disruptive capabilities into training and future combat systems. Drawing insights from recent conflicts, this session will illuminate the lessons that will shape tomorrow's operational requirements. Hear from experts on the Department of War's adoption of commercial technology, the transition to robotic systems, and how innovation is being woven into naval planning, force development, and global operations to maintain a decisive edge in the future fight. Ladies and gentlemen, Rear Admiral Selby.
Thanks, Grace. So Grace is a robotics major, and she wants to be a submariner. So, yep, awesome. So thanks, Grace. Good job. Okay, so how's everybody doing today? Doing okay? All right, so I want some more energy here. Come on, folks. All right, so, yeah. So I'm going to, here's the agenda. I'm going to do a quick intro of my panel. And I've got a few kind of prep questions, and I'm going to kind of ask those as jump balls, and we're going to see kind of where those go. And really the goal is to kind of get to the Q&A from you and the online folks kind of sooner rather than later. So that sound okay? All right, awesome. Okay, so to my left, you have Bob Harwood, who's a retired 3-star Navy SEAL. Bob's currently working at Shield AI as the executive vice president. He has spent a tremendous amount of time in the Middle East. We were just talking about that, Abu Dhabi, and that's kind of as a post-Navy guy. But when he was in the Navy, he's been to such Garden Isle spots as Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, and Bosnia. So Bosnia's actually not so bad now, but back then. But he's got a lot of time kind of in the sandbox and the mountain regions of that part of the world, as it were. Spent some time at Lockheed Martin doing international stuff, and again, now with Shield AI. In the middle, we got Mike Manazar, Nasty. Mike is an F-14 guy, so he flew Tomcats. He commanded the Tomcatters, which is Fighter Squadron 31. And also commanded USS Nimitz, was a Strike Group commander, Strike Group 8 on the Eisenhower. And then he spent some time in the building, NH staff, N98, and then N9 as you wrapped up your career. Did some time at Boeing, and he's now doing time at Hadrian, right? And so he's doing that, which is a really amazing kind of advanced manufacturing shop out in Torrance, California. He's also an author. Lead to Win's his book, and so we need to talk about how you wrote that book. I've got a couple books in my head, but I have not figured out how to actually sit down to do that yet. That's later. Next, I've got to my far left is find your page here, Mark. Mark Cancian, who's a colonel from the Marine Corps, retired. Mark is currently a senior advisor at CSIS. Defense and Security Department. He's done some time there since been there since 2015, almost 10 years now, so over 10 years. Prior to that, he spent some time at Office of Management and Budget, where he did the Force Structure and Investment Division. And prior to that, he did some time at PA&E, the Cape Shop. A lot of time in the Marine Corps, spent some time in Desert Storm in Iraq twice. And we were just talking, he said he actually retired twice, and the second time was on demand from Sink House, which I understand that one very well. And then finally on the big screen behind me and over to my left here, we've got retired Commander Zach Staples, who is the founder and CEO of a small startup down in Austin, Texas called Fathom 5. The way he describes it, it's like where AI and grease come together. So a lot of whole mechanical electrical stuff and how you apply AI. He's got the actual program of record for CBM Plus, Condition-Based Maintenance Plus, for the Navy. He's got that deployed on several destroyers right now, and he's actually pushing AI updates to those algorithms on about a quarterly basis, which is still, in his mind and mine, still too slow, but far better than the updates we do on most other ships. Zach's been running this company since he retired about 2016, was it? 17? Somewhere in that range. All right, you're muted, so we're gonna need you here soon. But gotcha. Anyway, he also used to run this series called Hack the Machine. So if anybody remembers those events, these were big events we would hold in places like Boston and MIT. We did one in Seattle. We did one in Brooklyn Navy Yard. And the last one we did was in Arlington, Virginia during COVID. And we would bring hundreds of people together with kind of realistic problems on Navy ships that we'd ask these teams to help us go solve. A lot were in the cyber realm, but when I was the chief engineer, I said, hey, I want to do stuff in the more cyber physical world. And so we did a lot of stuff with predictive maintenance, with advanced manufacturing, and we brought in some amazing teams. Actually, the Naval Academy had several teams over the course of the years that we did it that actually did really well at those events. But anyway, that's Zach Staples. Okay, so that's the team. And let's kind of get to it and see where this takes us. Just real quick scene setter. So we talk about conflict. So as I just think back to kind of recent history, and I'm talking kind of about the new nature of warfare. If you think back to 2020, most people don't think about this one, but there was a conflict, the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War between Azerbaijan and the Armenian forces, where Azerbaijanis used UAVs, mostly Turkish and Russian UAVs, to actually overwhelm the Armenian forces. And that was happening right when I took over as Chief of Naval Research. And I was kind of watching that kind of really closely. And most people weren't really talking about it. But I was like, this is actually impactful. This should be telling us all something. You know what kind of happened in 2021. And what I'm talking about, in 2021, we did this thing called Integrated Battle Problem 21. In April of 21. And Michael Stewart is here somewhere. Michael's right here. So Michael, myself, and a group of other folks convened with a Silicon Valley thought leader, Steve Blank, and we basically came up with what became the hedge strategy. And I still remember that whiteboard. We were talking about the small, the agile, and the many. And that event, for me personally, was a very pivotal moment where I realized that there was a different way of thinking about conflict. And then I also knew, because when I was Chief of Naval Research, I deployed over $10 billion across the 3 years that I was there. And if you think broadly of where I deployed that money, and this is very general, but it's basically these three buckets: AI, robotics, and advanced sensors. And those three buckets, those three areas, those three domains are what is basically enabling this warfare that we're starting to see all over the world. And so that was kind of 21 when the hedge strategy was baked. We did that last Hack Machine in Arlington. We put out a video that's still on YouTube to this day, 34 minutes long, and you can just Google my name, Selby Reimagine Naval Power, it comes up. And that's where I kind of laid out the hedge strategy. That got a lot of traction, got me invited to go speak at Aspen Security Forum. I still remember this. I came off the stage at Aspen after being with Reid Hoffman, myself on stage, riffing about, warfare and technology. And I get off the stage and my aide is in the back waving me down. And he's like, the Deb's office wants you to go see her. I go, what, right now? And so anyway, the long and short is she wanted me to come in because she wanted to meet me. And I said, do I need to do it now? Because I'm on my way to Asia. They're like, no, go to Asia. But when you come back, she wants you to come in. So literally, we're like calling her office to find out what I needed to bring. What's the read ahead for this thing? And they literally kept saying, no, she wants to meet you. So literally, I go in her office a couple weeks after the Aspen thing, and she's like, hey, I keep hearing about what you're doing. Tell me the story. Well, so I laid out the hedge strategy for her. I laid out the whole thing with the small, the agile, the many, this whole idea of autonomous warfare. And I retired shortly after that. And the next thing I know, as a retired guy, I start seeing the news about Replicator. Somewhere in there also, I didn't talk about this, but somewhere in there also I got a lot of Hill people calling me, asked me to go over to the Hill to talk about what I was basically describing this new warfare area. And I still remember Ken Calvert asking me, he said, Lauren, how much do you think to do this? I said, $1 billion a year, sir. I said, you can't do that in year one. But I said, I think after 3 years, you ramp to about $1 billion a year. And that's what he started putting over to DIU. Anyway, we can also talk about DIU, and I've got a lot of beefs about the way this is actually playing out personally. But anyway, that's the scene setter. So warfare is changing. Obviously, we don't know what happened in February of 22 when Russia rolled into Ukraine. Michael talked about that in the last panel. We saw warfare change before our eyes, and we saw warfare change on a daily, if not hourly basis, when people are literally programming on the battlefield, trying to change algorithms to try to change the behavior of drones to cause effect on the adversary, whether that's on the sea or in the air. And that's still happening to this day, obviously. 2023, Israeli-Hamas conflict started, and then also the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea started kicking off with the use of drones to attack commercial as well as military shipping. And so we are clearly at an inflection point. I think we're still in it. I don't think we're through it yet. I think the story of this will not be written for probably another 10 to 20 years, but we are clearly feeling this in our personal lives as well as in our professional lives as warriors. So we're right in the middle of that thing, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Okay, you guys ready? All right. So first area I want to talk about is that new administrations come in. New SecNav has recently announced the formation of this Naval Rapid Capability Office, which is going to consolidate some of the other offices like Michael's Disruptive Capability Office, Naval X, and a few other things that are going to kind of roll up into this thing. How do you view this realignment, and does it reflect kind of the necessary evolution or maybe even revolution that's needed to accelerate innovation, or are there risks in collapsing these organizations into one? Open question.
Well, I'll start off, and I'm always struck by, everybody's talking about innovation, technology, and all, but that's really what differentiated our Navy community. And since I see all the mids here, I always have to pay homage to the mids because that's why we're here. None of it happens without leadership. If you look back at our time, at history, it was those leaders who had the courage and strength to buck the system because they believed in a technology and brought it to bear. So you're all going to go off and be surface warfare officers, submariners, and maybe one or two of you maybe really hit the lottery and get to be a SEAL. But what we really need you to be as leaders, if you look back at Admiral Rickover, if you had met him, he was a very unpleasant person to be around. But that personality made us the nuclear Navy we are today, and because of that, we can project power anywhere in the world. You look at Grace Hopper, computerized our ships and took us forward. Nimitz, everybody thought he won the war in the Pacific. That's right. But if he hadn't fought and been an advocate for getting away from battleships and moving to aircraft carriers, we wouldn't be there. So I need leaders who can go forward and ramrod this technology and make it happen. We're seeing all the right steps, setting up the processes, the bureaucracy, but I need you all to be leaders who believe in something, understand that con-op, and again, go forward and push it. I think back of our history, my father was flying drones off his ships in 1958 through 62. It was the Dash, deployable anti-submarine helicopter. Well, folks, we're back to doing that now, 60 years later. We had a vertical launch takeoff and landing jet called the Pogo, the Nutcracker, very appropriately named, by the way. But the technology was not there. The technology is here today because the civilian industry has demonstrated to us with Elon Musk and vertical launch and recovery rocket ships. If you can, and that's what the drones are doing. Drones are such a problem right now because they can take off and land anyone and no one knows where they're coming from. And you're going to see unveiling this week of a jet-powered vertical takeoff and landing jet. So the ConOps and the need has been there because we know our adversaries are going to go after our runways day one. Mm-hmm. We're going to need that sort of capability. So I think all these processes and systems are defined. We're trying to dip, but it will all hinge on leaders who know how to work the system, have the strength and force to bring it to fruition. And that's the challenge you're all going to face. So full speed ahead, so to speak, and good luck. So back to the question, I think everyone acknowledges the problem, and we're being out-innovated. We spent billions of dollars to develop PREDs in Afghanistan to watch things. In a matter of weeks, the Ukrainians innovate and make it a strategic deterrence, if not an equalized, with kinetic tactical drones. And we saw 13 capital ships at the bottom of the Black Sea because someone had a con op and forced that technology to be. So I think we're there, but again, it's important to who's going to be the leaders who can make this, bring it in, develop, and get the con op with the speed of relevancy we need.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I would add to that, definitely 100% agree with Admiral Harwood's characterization. It takes leadership to do this. I've watched several reorganizations, and like Lauren said, I left the Navy as the N9, was the N98 before that, was the deputy N98 before going to sea, and so was in requirements for a long time. And during that time, we, figured out that obviously the N9s of the world can't innovate, and neither can anybody. So we need an innovation cell. So they stood one up. The challenge is you got to follow the money. And so when these large programs of record exist and they take a whole bunch of the Navy's $170 billion budget or whatever it is now, maybe $200 billion of stuff in there, and it's all locked in, it leaves a little bit, and people generally think of innovation as R&D. And so we'll do some R&D, and those guys over in N94, or they do R&D, and then we'll kind of see what happens here. So you need that leadership Admiral Harwood talked about to actually pull this thing through. So will this, the centralization, work for us? It remains to be seen. Up at the OSD level, DIU was pulled into R&E, so research and engineering. If you have M.O. Michael up there, driving what needs to happen from DOD, yeah, maybe it's going to happen. There's they threw out JSIDs completely, so the systems don't work. I'm a little concerned they had nothing to replace it, so all the babies went out with the bathwater, and so we'll see what happens. But as we look at this, you need Admiral Harwood's leadership to drive the innovation in to go do this stuff. The conflicts we're in the middle of, all extremely serious if you're the one at the receiving end of one of those drones we're talking about. But for us, right now, as the United States, are all learning environments. Those should be the clarion calls for us to be able to look at this innovation going forward and what we should do about that. But organizationally, it remains to be seen whether singly as a major group or whether we're all separate, naval X's and all those kind of things. Because heretofore for me, as an N9 kind of a person and watching this happen as a Boeing executive, they didn't have the traction that the people that thought about them had, because we wouldn't actually move the money there and make that come to the fore. And Congress hates a slush fund. They can't stand a slush fund. And so you have to be able to show what the money's going to go to, and you can't just hand it to somebody and go, here, Dave, go run this R&D thing called RCO, and we'll see what we're going to do with it. Here's your $1 billion to do that. The people in the HACD and the SACD are going to go, wait a minute, hold on a second. So we have to overcome our own system, use the leadership we're talking about, so you have a Rickover-like person over there on the Hill and in the halls of the Pentagon and in the front offices of all the primes going, okay, this is what we're going to do, and you can look right over there to the east and to the west and see why we have to do it. But you need the leadership and the structure and the money to be able to get after what Lauren's talking about.
Absolutely. Thoughts, Mark? Or?
The only thing I'd add is, reorganization is always an attractive option to give at least the illusion of progress. But if the leadership isn't there, if the money isn't there, then you've just created, one more step in the process.
Yeah. Okay. Zach, Austin, you're
Volume on,
muted.
is it coming through?
Oh, try again.
I think it's them.
Turn
All
it
right,
on.
how about now? We got volume in?
We got it. Yep.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So first off, Lauren, thanks for inviting me to this panel. I really appreciate it. This is the topic I care the most about: integration of innovation. And I think Kara on the previous panel talked about integration at scale is the challenge. I think the question is, will creating another innovation cell with a different mandate and charter and leadership team result in the delivery of that innovation to warfighters at scale? And gosh, I hope so, but nobody's done that. It's very difficult to go find any organization in government or outside of government and say, hey, show me the innovation scale, your innovation cell that ended up capturing a lot of budget from the rest of the organization. So that's just a hard thing to find. The second thing that's really hard to find is a group that started at Echelon in the Pentagon and then ultimately was loved by E1 to E7. So I don't know anybody, and so when I go ask, my son who's an E4 to name me one like secretariat member, they can't tell me one, so I just get concerned about where we decided to put the new RCO. And I get concerned about, is this an innovation cell? Or is that, so they're supposed to be responsible for doing the innovation? Or is this a empowered resource team of people that's going to go like knock down barriers for innovators across the Navy, and which would be super useful at Echelon, right? Yeah. So what their charter and mandate is, I think will really determine whether it's successful.
Yeah, and I think most people here are probably tracking the recent memo that's established this. It's really three things. It's a PAE, which is a Portfolio Acquisition Executive, which is a kind of a new construct that's happening in the Secretariat. You're going to see this roll out across the Secretariat for the different PEOs. But a PAE that sits above a PEO, so you're going to see a PAE RAS and a PEO RAS, Robotic Autonomous Systems RAS, and I think a DAS and RAS or unmanned, which I don't know. But it's we're going back to the past here, Kara. But you're going to see that roll out. And I have the same concerns about doing this in the Pentagon. I do believe you do need to have somebody that controls the money, that is accountable in the Pentagon. You've got to have that. And Michael and I talked about this years ago when we were standing up the Unmanned Task Force. I really believe it should be kind of a fleet-driven initiative. And I jokingly came up with this thing. I called it the eighth Fleet Commander, number 8, 8th Fleet. I like 8. My birthday is the 8th of December. Whatever, I came up with that number. But I said you need a virtual commander, a virtual fleet commander who has the ability to interface with the actual fleet commanders, and it needs to be naval, so also the Marines. So you need to be working with the Marines for their requirement. Not really the requirements, their problems, but the person has to have acquisition authority, contract authority, legal shop. Needs to be its own BSO, really, in some ways. And you need to be able to have enough money that you can not only find the problems, but you can also now work with industry, academia, and government labs to find solutions and then set up experimentations. And this is, Michael, this is what you were doing. I mean, you were actually trying to do this, unfortunately, on a shoestring budget, which was biggest challenge you had. But I think you need someone like that. Personally, I think it needs to be kind of a 3-star kind of level person who can kind of interface with the other three stars in the Marine Corps and Navy side to come up with those discussions about what your true problems are and what we can do to go solve those. I think if you could set up something with a really very quick recursive loop feedback mechanism, test, iterate, keep doing that, I think you can make some progress. So we'll see. We'll see where this all goes. But anyway, so I think we're all showing a little skepticism about where this is going, but we're all hopeful it's going to work because we need it to work. Okay, next question. All right, so from your perspective, what disruptive capabilities or innovations have already transformed the battlespace in recent conflicts? And what lessons should we carry forward to shape future operational requirements? Now, we've already talked about the obvious ones, which is the drone itself. But what else have we seen come out of these recent conflicts that we need to figure out how to get on top of, or we're going to be on the losing end of a fight?
I'll go first on this one.
Yeah, go for it, Zach.
Yeah. So I think it got brought up briefly. I think by Michael Stewart in the last panel, but the idea that if Putin knew how successful the Ukrainians would be with drone warfare, would it have changed his strategic calculus to invade? That's an impossible question to answer definitively. But the key takeaway there, the key lesson is that we could be able. There's a potential to alter our strategic deterrence narrative and the credibility of American deterrence through the adoption of new warfighting concepts. And unfortunately, our greatest peer competitor, the highest likelihood of global conflict comes from China, who's had a 30-year opportunity to study how we do carrier strike group, submarine, and task force operations. and then plan against that, as it's been previously mentioned. The difficulties in planning and the difficulties in estimation of the strategic outcome that are created by altogether new and operating concepts could give us a more credible deterrent against a war in the Pacific. And there's almost no amount of dollars that is too much to achieve deterrence of a future major conflict with China.
Can I jump on that? 100% agree. I live in the Middle East. I travel extensively. I'm in and out of Ukraine all the time. And for the last 10 years, and I'm not a political guy, but we had lost strategic deterrence. And you knew this because and I talked to a lot of world leaders, especially in the Middle East, and they'd all said, no one trusts us, no one respects us, but more importantly, no one feared us anymore. And so I do, and I want to draw a correlation. It's not the drone per se, and I think this is the vision I think we're going to get to for strategic deterrence. What drones have enabled us to do is shorten the kill chain significantly. And I'll give you an example. When we went into Afghanistan in 2001, our first ISR platform was a P3 after we bought all back the Stingers. We knew there was no air threats. We had no drones, so we brought in a P3. We then built 50 orbits so I could watch people 24/7 and know when I wanted to hit them. And at first we were using close air support, but they had to get fuel, they had to get online, they had to get the 9 line, and then they'd miss the goddamn target, excuse my language. So, but in about 2005...
The deal is broken. Now we're just going to say what we really think.
Yeah.
So
well, this got me in trouble with Lockheed Martin at one point because in 2005, I brought in HIMARS. Yeah. So now I could see that guy and say, shoot. I'd go outside, watch this thing launch, and then it hit it. So that kill chain was down to about 60 seconds. Yeah. And here's where I think we're going with drones. That's going to restill deterrence at the strategic level. Mm-hmm. We're going to have, like the drones today, vertical launch and take out. They're going to be jet powered. The one you're going to see unrolled here in the next few days is a F-16 engine that's tried and tested. These will have ranges of 3,000 miles, 6-hour flight time. Mm-hmm. And because you don't have a cockpit, you don't have an oxygen system, I can put weapons on these things. And these things will be up there all the time. So the second I see a target, my kill chain's almost going to be real time. If we can do that with one other capability, wide area surveillance. I wrote the National Strategy for Maritime Security when I was at the White House in 2004. And working with the Navy, our number one objective was wide area surveillance. We couldn't see North Korean ships once they left port until they went through the Straits of Malacca. If we have wide area surveillance so that we can provide through satellites and drones targetable information on every Chinese ship whenever it's underway, and then our kill chain is almost near, they ain't going to come out on the ships. Yeah. We ain't going to have conflict. The cost will be too high. So I can see where this is all going with exactly what you said, to establish strategic deterrence. Yeah. If we had had that when the Russians were lining up those tanks to come in Ukraine, we could have averted this war. So I think that's what drones are going to enable, that ability to make the kill chain almost real time and with mass. Yeah. So your ability to defend is almost irrelevant. And that will be the greatest deterrence to conflict I measure. So I think that's where this is all going.
I completely agree. Let me offer one other thought, and I'm looking forward to hear what the other panelists think. It's shortening kill chains, 100%. The second thing that successful integration and adoption of robotic systems does is shortens the innovation chain. And this is vitally important. You know, a good friend of mine went back to Afghanistan once every other year for his entire 28-year career in the Marine Corps, starting as a second lieutenant through 1 or 2 star, right? And when I asked him kind of what, after Forrest Gump stops running, like, what's your big takeaway? He said, the human animal will find a way to not get killed better than any other animal I've ever hunted in my entire life. And when you asked him to elaborate, he's like, it didn't matter if I was finding and killing Taliban from a human source, which people have been targeting off human for thousands of years, or whether I had a ball in space that gave me a picture, gave me a target to hit. They would figure out how it was that they were getting killed and then do something different. And when we fight a high-end technology fight, if our technology can't move as quickly as the human animal finds a way to not be targeted, then we're going to lose. So put this in perspective. If we've got a USV or a UUV squadron being operated by some lieutenant OIC on some unnamed island in the Pacific, and the Chinese come after that squadron one day and we defeat them, they will be back in a day or 2 or 5 with something different. And if that lieutenant has to call NAVC or NAVAIR and ask them to start over and give him something different, well, 5 years later, after the war's over and written about, he'll get a change. So what we've got to do at the integration level is we've got to have about a dozen things in a Connex box that she or he can choose to put on those USVs and UUVs so they can actually innovate their ability to respond and attack faster than the enemy can bring something new at them. With the kill chain speed that the Admiral was talking about, and that is a deterrent effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mark.
We're talking a lot about drones, but keep in mind that there are many kinds of drones, and the technologies are not all in the same place. We've read a lot about first-person viewer drones in Ukraine. Those have become very widespread. They've been through several generations, way down the learning curve for application in wartime. Other areas like ground unmanned systems, they're coming in Ukraine. They're using some of them, but they've been slower. When you think about unmanned aircraft that would work with strike aircraft, the Navy has the MQ-25, not in the field yet. One area that I would focus on, which was a surprise in Ukraine, is unmanned surface vessels, because nobody really thought much about them before the war, but Ukraine was able to cobble together some technologies and strike a number of Russian vessels, sink a number of them, and along with its long-range ground-to-ground capabilities, drove the Russians out of the Black Sea. Quite extraordinary for a country that doesn't have a navy. They don't have any ships and they don't have any naval aviation, but they were able to contest the Black Sea. And the USVs were a key part of that. And I think if I had to pick one technology that has changed at least naval warfare right now, that's the one I would pick.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, can I ask one question? Do we have any computer scientists mids here? Okay, you raised your hand. Stand up, young lady.
All right.
Because this is just relevant to what you said. A few years ago, we were at a conference with the founder of NVIDIA. What is artificial intelligence? Okay, what's his name? Chang? I'm sorry.
Jensen.
Jensen Chang.
Yeah.
Here's what he said, and it's just to what you said.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence at its best form, when it's operating, will detect the problem and write the algorithm to correct it.
Yeah.
So this cycle of innovation is going to be just unending. And so it's going to determine who wins or who doesn't by innovation. And this AI, I think, is going to enable us than ever before. And the panel, I got to make one last comment because I violently disagree with the panel that before us. And this is, again, all my comments are oriented to you, Mitch. You can sit down. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. But they said this fear of killer robots, no, we're always going to keep them in control and monitor them. But I have a different approach, and it's kind of predicated on who you are and how lucky you are. I get all these kids come to me now and say, hey, I'm thinking of going Army, Navy, Air Force. I say, hey, they're all great except for two things. Number one, where you live. Has anyone here ever lived on an Army base? Yeah, I lived at Fort Bragg. It's pretty grim. So those poor guys, they got to go live their lives in places like that where you're going to be Coronado, Virginia. So that's number one. But number two, and I think important to you all, is our culture and our philosophy. And this is directly applicable to AI. In the Army, you do not do anything unless it's approved. Your career's over, you're dead. We operate completely differently. We're the unity team. Unless otherwise directed, here's what I'm doing, boss. And so it makes command and control quicker, and everything. I didn't ask permission to go in Afghanistan. I told my boss I was going. He didn't answer back, so off we went. Yeah. And that's how we formed. When our ships left port, we didn't talk to anyone. That's what AI is going to be. There are going to be three models. AI where the person is in the loop approving every step. I call that the Army version. You got the other Navy version where you're on the loop watching it, but you can stop at any time you want, like your boss does. He doesn't want to mess with you, but when he needs to stop you, he wants to do that. But the third and most strategic imperative, because this is China, we're not going to have comms. We're not going to have GPS. 96% of the drones in Ukraine are being brought down every day by jamming. We've solved that problem with AI. We're going to have drones that can go deep into China and do what they need to do, and we won't know they're doing it.
Yeah. Let's unpack that a little bit, because I mean this gets after one of the earlier discussions about trust, right? We had a discussion about trust, and I guess I don't know if Jack is still here, but you don't like. I guess you don't like the word trust, but that same idea. I mean, so let's kind of unpack that. So if you think about the way we build a system today, like a warship, like a submarine or an aircraft carrier, we have very discrete points of time in the acquisition and build cycle where we do different testing, right? Subsystem level testing, system level testing, system testing, whole ship testing, right? And there's a very, very rigorous, DOT&E. There's a whole, organization that's set up to go do this. It's kind of the VVNA, the verification, validation, and accreditation of those systems, right? But they're also predicated on working to a defined requirement, a KPP. Well, when you're talking about autonomous systems that learn, that get better every day, how do you do that? So any thoughts? And Zach, you and I have talked about this, and I'll let you maybe riff a little bit about this. Your thoughts on how this?
Yeah, I'll just give I love what Kara said before. Kara ended the last panel talking about the need for something new, for something that is engineering around orchestrating systems, and the need to come up with a test and evaluation model that is stochastically based instead of deterministically based. So there is research and academic work that needs to get done, and then there's practical application. And my favorite practical application right now is the Navy owns like over 500, I think going towards 600 unmanned small craft, and doesn't have an approved navigator, or doesn't even have a way to qualify an officer of the deck for those things. And so we're buying it, and John Mustin was right on the mark earlier about it works. You can go out and see it work, but we need to come up with a way to quantifiably say it works. Because, you and I have both done this, Lauren. I've watched an ensign on the bridge do pretty well in open water OOD and screw it up pretty bad going through the Straits of Singapore, right?
Captain has the con. It's like, it's all over.
Right? And so, like, let's be honest. Our AI navigator is somewhere around probably Ensign JG right now. And we've got no idea what the SWO board for an AI navigator looks like. And so, to John's pushback on, I don't want to give you a boat for a week of demo to go to a T&E event. Okay, I agree with that. But we got to go figure out, how do I qualify the OOD navigator, because an accident is going to happen. Right. And in my time at Pac Fleet, one of the things working in the N3 shop that happened was the Greenville sunk Ahu Maru. And finding one on that Jagman cannot be, there was no qualified navigator on the Navy vessel involved in the collision.
Well, who here has a completely autonomous car and uses it to go places?
I do. My drive.
So he has the
time.
trust and confidence. How long does this take it? 10 years of Tesla? So it is going to take time to develop that trust and confidence, especially at military standards. But we got to get on with it. We've got to compress that trust cycle. We got to get that trust.
Because again, to the earlier panel, I don't want to find out in battle. I want to do those reps and sets somewhere, somewhere safe, and then figure it out and then deploy the damn thing. Now, Ukraine, they don't have that option. They're obviously doing this on the fly. That's obviously because of where they are and what's happening. Mark, you had a thought?
Yeah, I mean, to build on this idea, right now the acquisition system basically has two modes. There's the experiment that goes out there in onesies and twosies, and then there's the program of record, where you build 600 of them or whatever. And what we need to do is get something in the middle to get a capability out there into the fleet in some numbers, and to play with it, to build this kind of trust that we need to be able to rely on a new technology, but also to figure out just, what do we really need out of it? It's going to evolve very, very quickly. I guarantee that the second 20 USVs are going to look very different from the first, but we got to get something out there in some numbers, and the testing of it is critical. One of our discussion questions is about how do you get stuff out quickly and still do the testing and the ethical overview and whatnot. And, many people, when they think about speeding up the acquisition system, think, okay, let's get rid of the lawyers, let's get rid of the testers, and just get this thing out there. And that sounds great, but those people are in the loop for a reason. And for the Navy, I would remind everybody about the World War II torpedo fiasco. And if you are not aware of that, you need to go read up on it, because the Navy thought it had a wonderful new torpedo. It didn't work. And as a result, the U.S. submarine fleet was greatly degraded for 2 years. And huge detriment to our war effort, because we didn't do the testing, get it out there into the fleet. There was also a lot of secrecy issues.
Just one to add on before Nasty. Jim Mattis was one of those guys. I don't know if you know this or not. We deployed unmanned helicopters to Afghanistan in 2009. Jim Mattis had just gotten his first forge out, and everyone told him he couldn't do it. Hell with that, we're doing it. And he took a risk. I think it was called the K-Max, because we were getting so many IEDs. He said, hell, let's go experiment with them there if I can save guys' life. So another example of leadership being the differentiator. So Nasty, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Lauren asked, what key technologies are going to make a difference. I'll tell you, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Who'd have thought that chocolate and peanut butter would go together? But somebody did. Yes, AI. Yes, technology. You're going to need the human innovating. And you're going to need a human who's afraid of being killed or afraid of succeeding to innovate in order to do that. In this room right here, as safe as it is inside this auditorium, it's okay to say, at least we have a couple of wars going on right now, because that's the only thing that American technology is being catalyzed by, is there is people dying, and we need to do something different. And so the second thing I will tell you, as a bureaucrat, and I'm a really good bureaucrat, even as a knuckle-dragging fighter pilot throwing grenades in the Pentagon, I couldn't get anything done. because there was no sense of urgency to get it done. And so to what Mark talks about, we don't have a system in place to actually absorb the stuff that a human trying to make Reese's peanut butter cups and deploy them to the war fight is going to succeed, but we need that human to be able to do that. Yeah. I used to stand on stage as the N9 in 2016 and argue with people, I hope we don't go to war against China before we figure out how to go fast. Well, here we are. And so somehow we have to create a sense of urgency, and we have a bunch of technology now that can make Reese's peanut butter cups of the modern kind happen, and we need humans to be able to do that in a system that allows them to do that with a culture that doesn't say, ooh, yeah, but you didn't do the week-long RDT&E testing. Okay, those 600 unmanned vessels right now, how come they're not all there out there bumping around and Michael's running them around in different kinds of, we should be doing that right now before we actually have to do it real. So we have a significant problem. In my current life running around with Hadrian, I get to go to all these really cool, trade shows now. Instead of Sierra Space, I go to Reindustrialize in Detroit. And I see what people are doing to make Reese's peanut butter cups. I'm like, oh, that's a cool application. So Americans are the best in the world at innovating. We've proven that for decades. We still are. And so we just need to allow Americans to be able to do that in order to make Reese's peanut butter cups into this new war fight. And we'll be able to figure out what AI is trying to tell us what to do. We'll be able to figure, hey, let's try that instead of this. And, ooh, that didn't work, but let's innovate over here so that the human can figure out, at least on our side, more often than the other side, how to avoid getting killed.
Yeah, I wrote down as one of the sound bites, I was thinking about this last night, I said, we need to enable our armed forces to utilize one of our nation's greatest assets, American innovation economy. Right? We got to figure out how to unlock that. And that's the challenge here. And I think what we're seeing is kind of this impedance mismatch by the way kind of the high-tech world outside of the government is operating and how the government is operating. And as a former Chang for the Navy, I look at this problem, and again, I recognize, if all you got's a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And I know it's not just an engineering problem, but I do think there's an engineering aspect to this. And if you think about kind of the industrial era that most of us are used to, systems engineering was kind of the way you solved most of those problems, but it was kind of set on kind of fixed requirements, fixed KPPs, things that didn't really move much over decades, and so that process worked really well. As we got into the information age, digital engineering became a thing, and really what digital engineering did for the most part was just kind of took most of the practices that we did in an analog way, and we basically digitized it, right? That's kind of what it did. You came up with the digital thread. You did come up with things with digital twins, condition-based maintenance. So there's some goodness. I'm not suggesting it's not a good thing. It's a very good thing, very much needed. We then kind of moved into kind of more this operational era where we talk about mission engineering. How do you now talk about the mission of what that system, what that thing is going to do, and how do you now optimize that to accomplish said mission? But I think we're actually on the verge of a need for just a whole new branch of engineering, and I call it orchestration engineering. And I truly believe that in this world of AI-enabled design, AI-enabled operations, where things are changing rapidly and continuously, I think you have to have a whole different way of how you orchestrate the entire kit of hardware and software to bring it together. And I think that this is a whole new topic. I'm actually talking to some academics about this as a potential discussion at a place like MIT to breach this as a possible course to start talking about this, because I really believe in order to get after kind of this convergence of robotics, AI, advanced sensors, you've got to figure out a way to orchestrate this in a different way. And it's everything from a different operating system, a different a PaaS, a platform as a service that would enable this kind of activity, but it's really the engineering from the design to the build to the test and evaluation to the deployment and operation. It's got to be done, and I don't think there's too many people talking about this. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Let's go to your questions. What do you got? Who's got questions? Sir, tell me kind of who you are, where you're from, and your questions.
Scott Farr, recovering operator at Sentinel Horizon AI. Admiral Harwood, thanks for pointing out the innovation that occurred well before the JSIDS process existed. So, Admiral Nazar, thanks for admitting you're part of the problem. So, a couple things. First, the RCO is intended to deliver capability inside 2 years and the POM cycle. Right now, issue sheets are being written for 29, which is way out there. SPEED Act and Forged Act in the Senate and House are all about acquisition reform. And on Monday, JP Morgan Chase announced an investment of $1.5 trillion in the defense sector. two of you up here, three of you on the panel are involved with startups that can respond inside the POM cycle. How is that going to be a game changer for these midshipmen in the audience so that they can go out there and put it to the Chinese?
You mean specifically the JP Morgan Chase kind of announcement, this injection of capital?
Yes.
So I'll take a stab and you guys go from there. So I think if you look at the supply chain today, right, there are tens of thousands of vendors across the industrial base that supply parts for submarines and surface ships, right? If you look at those, the top tier guys, you know who those players are, right? They're your primes. But if you go down 3 and 4 levels in that supply chain, there are very small companies, and many of these are literally, you know, the mom and pop shops is what people used to call these ones, but they're very, very small companies, and they're making a very important thing, a widget, a thing for a submarine or for a destroyer. They are reluctant to build ahead of need and ahead of a paycheck from one of the primes that has to flow down to them. So what a lot of people are looking at, and I've actually been in the Office of Strategic Capital, talked to their credit arm about this, is if you can identify those companies in the supply chain, and most of those companies only need a loan on the order of $5-ish, $10-ish million. That's enough to give them solvency to go get ahead of need and get kind of prime the pump to get moving, right? So there is a whole host of folks that are thinking about that. Now, when you have $1.5 trillion, you're not going to write a $5 or $10 million check because you'd be writing a lot of checks, right? So you're going to go after kind of further up the food chain, and you're writing $200, $400, $500 million checks, right? You're writing big checks into some place where you need a big CapEx to try to come up with more capability to build things more efficiently, more effectively. Hopefully bring in technologies like your company and Divergent and others into the scene that can actually use advanced manufacturing techniques. So I think that has great promise. It's questions, everything is an execution here. But if you can go after the right companies, do the right kind of modernization, CapEx, so they have the capabilities to actually produce these things in a mature, advanced, digital engineered way, I think there's huge goodness in that. Any other thoughts here?
Well, Lauren, let me give a couple of quick feedback points.
Zach.
So first is on the $1.5 trillion investment. So I want to keep coming back to kind of the kind of what is the goal, right? Is that we never have to fight the Chinese. And I think that what we're talking a little bit before with strategic deterrence is how we get there. So when I see large announcements like the JP Morgan Chase, and I'm going to a JP Morgan event tomorrow to actually talk with them about this a little bit more. But
see if you get a little loan for your company there.
I got F1 tickets, don't ask for too much. So anyway, there is no number of factories that we can build in the United States of America that actually deters Chinese aggression. If we allow the Chinese to describe the sides of the conflict by volume, we can't catch up between now and the window where it will be important. I think so. There are vital investments in manufacturing technologies are absolutely essential. Like we need to get the 2.0 submarines we're paying for instead of like the 1.4 that are being delivered. So I mean that's important. But then at a bigger level, so that investment has to go into digital infrastructure that allows for the this new what you called orchestration engineering, how we actually test, validate, change, upgrade, deploy, certify, and cyber secure all of the software and AI innovation that's coming. That digital infrastructure investment has got to be part of this. And the second piece of how can the midshipmen in the room are about to go into their first kind of 5-year commitments, bring it to the Chinese. What I am most hopeful for with the new budget is if we can get the integration piece right, if we can get the orchestration engineering that you talked about correct, then there's this amazing opportunity to let the buyer move left and literally left towards the Pacific. Like right now, a defense end item costs $1 billion. And the only people with $1 billion checkbooks are in DC. If a defense end item costs $1 million or 500,000 or even 10 million, then fleet operators can buy what they need as long as they know it integrates. So if we can get integration right, then we can let the squadron commander or the 1-star strike group commander actually spend about $10 million of kit. that he knows is going to work. And so we literally move acquisition left because the integration problem is pre-solved by that underlying digital infrastructure.
Yeah, right. Okay, let's go Harlan.
I'm Harlan Owen. Bob, it's been a long time. Good to see you. I'm going to put you on the spot now. I believe the Department of Defense is in free fall. We're spending $1 trillion and the force is going to get smaller. You talk about leadership. 40 or so flag officers have been fired by the administration without any kind of cause, including a chairman of the Joint Chief, a CNO, and a commandant. Tell me what that does about leadership and UNO, dear. More importantly, in the Navy, it takes us 9 years or more to build a submarine. Columbia is going to cost $20 billion. And F-18s are flying the wings off because we can't get enough F-35s in the fleet. We need a revolution. We need to make fundamental change. Well, let me go on. I'm on the Commission for the Future Navy. The question is, how do you do that? Yeah. If I were CNO, I would be really worried about my job, frankly. And a lot of the powers of the CNO and the Commandant have been taken over by the Deputy Undersecretary of the Navy. I don't know whether you know that. So how do we motivate this profound change? And Nasty, you're talking about it. We need to do it. It almost goes back to the days when Bud Zumwalt was CNO, and Bud said, it's far better to beg forgiveness than to request permission. Mm-hmm. How do we really do that, working start from the inside?
I got to make one comment. 26 jobs in the Navy. Every day I lived thinking I was going to be gone the next day. Yeah. And everybody, this whole event down in Quantica, that's not a bad way for our naval officers to live. You've got to produce. You've got to have results. You've got to be hungry. Yeah. And if we can't inculcate that, we're never going to get the revolution. So it's back to that leadership. We got to have now more courage, strength, and conviction in what we believe, willing to fight and deliver that revolution more so than ever before. So inculcating that in these kids today in school here, while you're here, I don't care if you're going to be a SWO SEAL, I need you to be leaders who can go out every day and make a difference. So I think we start there first and foremost. And all of them are so much smarter than we are. Class of 79, we're the last all-male class. We're the lowest GPA of any graduating class. So I'm not the guy to be the, but yeah. But I think every officer has to be a part of that. You know, we used to, if you were outside the fold, didn't get in the fold, you'd get, now it's the opposite. I need those guys. We got to promote those guys. So I think it starts with the culture. So I think you're exactly, we need a revolution. We can't afford not just our military, our country. Yeah, you know, we got to get the bang for the buck. We got to be smarter. We've got to build deterrence that doesn't require 600 ship fleet because the Chinese are going to outbuild the hell out of us. Yeah. Now, we've got 70 years of experience that's going to keep us safe for another 20 or 30 years. But if we don't innovate cost effectively here in the near term, it's going to accelerate the confrontations that lie on the horizon.
Yeah. Awesome. Real quick. Yep.
Yeah, one maybe final comment, which is that when you talk about a revolution, you get a lot of excitement. And a lot of people believe that, you know, many of our systems are, you know, too exquisite, too expensive. But then when you got to take it down to the next level, it's okay, what do you mean? If you think the future is going to be unmanned, that we are going to have to operate in inside maybe a Chinese defensive bubble, maybe you cancel FAXX. You know, say 6th generation fight. I mean, that's the past. We need to go on to the future.
Yeah, awesome. Harry,
discuss.
I want to thank the panel, Zach, Mark, Mike, Bob. Thank you very much. And Ren, thanks so much.
All right, I hated to cut this panel short, but actually we were going long. So
There's beer waiting, I think.
Yeah, I know, and peanut butter cups upstairs. So I do want to thank Admiral Selby and our panelists, and a special thanks to Mike Manazar, who I called over the weekend and said, hey, I need your help backfilling an active duty type, and he said, I'm your man. So Midshipman Stalker, if she's still, yeah, there you are. Great job on the intro. And just some thanks. Thanks to those who were here today in person. Thanks to those who are joining virtually, have been with us all day. I really appreciate your support. Thanks to an outstanding partner, the U.S. Naval Academy. Superintendent General Borg-Schulte wanted to be here, but he's active duty, so he couldn't, and because of the shutdown. And we could not have done this without the support of the William M. Wood Foundation, so thanks to them as well. I invite you all topside to the topside terrace. We have a reception that runs until 5. We have shuttle buses that are going to continuously run from the Institute back to the parking lot until 5 p.m. And thanks again, and safe travels on your way home. Appreciate it. Oh, I forgot.